Today we are going to be making enemies follow the player around like this. This is part 2 in our game series where we are making a Vampire Survivors-like game. If you're new, check out the first video in this series where we set up the project. Let's get into it. To start things off, we are going to clean up our assets folder a little bit. We are going to create a new folder and name it Tiles. And then I'm going to take all of my tiles and drag them into the tile folder. I'm going to do it the same with a folder called Scripts and throw the movement script inside of the Scripts folder. Now, in the last tutorial, I've mentioned creating a random tile set for the background, but I do not have that right now. And that's because there's an easier way to do it, using rule tiles. So let's go to the tiles folder, and then I'm going to right click, create 2D tiles rule tile. I'm going to name this rule tile. Then for the number of tiling rules, I'm just going to do 1. And then for this tiling rules, I'm going to do the output to a random, the size 6. And then for all of these, I am just going to change these floor stone sprites. So I'm going to drag that sprite in, then the next, all for all of these sprites. Now, once all of those sprites are in, I'm going to take this tile, this rule tile, and then go to the tile palette and drag the rule tile in so it looks right here. Then I'm going to do the box, zoom out a bit, and just create a random box. And now you can see that this is most definitely more random than the things we did before. So now, what I'm going to do is create an enemy prefab with a sprite. So what we're going to do is go to the idle animations of this ghost and just drag it into the hierarchy. I'm going to change the order and layer to 1, and then I'm going to rename it to Ghost Enemy. I'm going to add a circle collider to this, and then I'm going to create a prefab out of it. So I'm going to go to the assets folder and then drag in my Ghost Enemy. So now the Ghost Enemy is a prefab. I'm going to delete it right here and create a new empty game object, and I'm going to call this Enemy Manager. Then I'm going to add a component to the script, add a new script, and then name it the same thing, Enemy Manager. Then I'm going to open up this in Microsoft Visual Studio, but you can open it up in whatever coding editor you choose. Now, once we are in here, we are going to create a timer and then spawn a ghost whenever that timer goes off. So I'm going to create a float named current time. I'm going to set this equal to 0, and then I'm going to do a serialized field float, and I'm going to name this max time. I'm going to set this to 3. Now inside of update, I'm going to check if current time is greater than max time. Then I'm going to set current time equal to 0, and then we're going to spawn an enemy, but not right now. And then I'm going to do else current time plus equal time dot delta time, so that this goes up every single frame. So now we need to spawn the enemy. So I'm going to instantiate, and then we need a reference to the object. So I'm going to create a serialized field game object, and I'm going to name this Ghost Prefab. I'm going to spawn in this Ghost Prefab at vector2.0, and then with quaternion dot identity, which means no rotation. You'll now see that we are spawning this ghost at the middle of the screen, but we are actually going to take the position and move it to another position at the screen's edge so that the ghosts are never spawning right in the middle of the screen. So I'm going to make a variable out of this. I'm going to say game object ghost is equal to this game object, But you can see that right now we are spawning the ghosts at the middle of the screen every single time, which is not something we want to do. So let's create a random spawning position for them. So we're going to check if a random.value is greater than 0.5f. So this is just a random flip of a coin. Then we're going to do a x position, and it's going to be a random.value, and if this is greater than 0.5f, then we'll put it to 0, and then else we'll do the screen.width. Then we'll do the same for a float y. I'm going to set these equal to a random.value or a random.range from 0 to screen height. Then I'm going to get a vector2 spawn position, and then this is going to be equal to camera.main.screen2world with a new vector2 with x and y as the arguments. And this just creates a random screen position, a spawn position for our ghost, except this only does it if the random.value is greater than this. So we're going to have to do an else statement, and then else float x is equal to random.range between 0 and screen.width. And then the float y this time is equal to a random.value if it's greater than 0.5f. We're going to set it to 0, else screen.height. Then we're going to do the same thing. A vector2 spawn position is equal to camera.main.screen2world with a new vector2 with the arguments being x and y. Then instead of spawning it at vector2.0, we're going to spawn it at spawn position. This is giving us an error here because it is not a variable that we are able to access. So out here, I'm just going to create a vector2 spawn position, and then I'm going to delete these vector2s right here. So now this works because the vector2, this spawn position, is declared inside the same scope as we are spawning this enemy. So now, if we go back inside of Unity, go to our enemy manager, drag in our ghost enemy, and change the max time to 1, and then I'm going to change the player. And now if we click the play button, the enemies will be spawning right outside our field of view. You can see that they're spawning right out here, spawning right there, and they're always spawning right around to the top or near the top of the screen. Some of them are spawning down at the bottom, and they're always spawning at the edges of the screen, which is what we want. I'm going to change that. And now, what we want to do is create variables for our health for our player. So I'm going to drag this script into the scripts folder, and then for the player, I am going to add another script. This script I'm going to name player health. This player health script I'm going to open up, and then I'm just going to create a float or an integer because it shouldn't be a float, and I'm going to name it current health. Then I'm going to create a serialized field integer, and I'm going to name it max health. And then when start is called, I'm going to set current health equal to max health, so that the player gets max health when he starts the game. Then inside the update function, I'm going to check if our current health is less than or equal to 0, then we have game over. So I'm just going to do a debug.log, and then I'm just going to call game over. And we need to create some more methods to be able to change our current health. So I'm going to create a public void. I'm going to name this method change health, and I'm going to name it int change by. so that other things can call this method when they hit the player or the player hits them. So I'm going to do current health plus equal change by. So now when the enemy hits the player, it can call this change health by -1, and the current health will decrease by 1. And now, once that is going, we need some enemy logic so that the enemy can go towards the player. So I'm going to go towards this ghost prefab here and double click on it. And then I'm going to change the circle collider and make it a bit smaller. And then offset it just so it's in the middle. So now the player has a little bit of leniency so he can get a little bit inside the ghost but not take damage. I'm going to add an enemy logic script to this ghost so the enemy can follow the player. So inside here, I'm going to create a serialized field float named speed. So the ghost can have different speeds. Now I have a challenge for you. Make the enemy logic so that the enemy can follow the player by yourself. Pause the video, give it a try, and then come back when you're finished. Okay, once you've given that a go, let's look what I have done. So I'm going to set the enemy transform.position equal to a vector2.moveTowards, and then the current is going to be the transform.position. The target is going to be the player.position. So we are going to need a reference to our player. So I'm going to create a transform. I'm going to name this player. And then in the start method, I'm going to set player equal to find first object by type, and it's going to be the player movement dot game object dot transform. So this is going to be the player. So now we're going to move towards the player dot position, and then the max distance delta will be our speed. So now the enemy will move towards the player at every frame. And then we want to check if the enemy hits the player. So I'm going to do an on collision enter 2D. And then I'm going to check if the collision dot game object dot tag is equal to player. So if the thing we hit is the player, then I'm going to get the collision dot game object dot get component, and it's going to be player health, and then we're going to call the change health method by -1. So it's going to hit the player and take 1 hit of damage. Then I'm also going to do a debug.log that says hit player. Now this can move around and hit the player. So, and the reason I'm getting an error here is because I have to do hit player in double quotes. And now before we go back inside of Unity, there is one more line of code we need to do. Inside this vector2.moveTowards, I'm going to multiply our speed by time.delta time so that it is more consistent across different devices. So now, when I open up inside of Unity, I'm going to go check that my player, the max health I have is 2. On the Ghost prefab, I have the speed as 1. And then on the enemy manager, I have the max time as 1 as well. So now when I click the play button, the enemies should be spawning outside the screen, and then they should be moving towards us, as you can see that they are. So now if I hit into one of them, we should be able to see that it is not going to call the method because the player doesn't have the player tag on it. So if we add the player tag and then click the play button, then we should be able to hit the enemy. So now when enemies spawn, if I hit into them, you can see hit player and game over, because I was hit by the enemy. And then I'm falling around, which means we just have to change. We have to freeze rotation on the Z-axis for our rigid body 2D. We now have enemies that follow the player and an enemy manager that keeps track of all the enemies. In the next video, we will add weapons to kill the enemies that are following the player. If you are enjoying this series, please subscribe for more Unity tips and games.